Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Amp Up Your Email Game. Today's webinar is hosted by 250OK and Map Digital. So just a very short bit about 250OK and Map Digital. So 250OK is an email analytics platform bringing marketers advanced insights into email deliverability, design, sender reputation, fraud protection, and customer engagement, the ultimate email intelligence add-on to any ESP. And Map Digital is a cross-channel customer engagement platform. And with Map Cloud, you can decide what the best channel, best time, and best frequency to deliver your messages, while your team can focus on what's important and exciting. Now, let me just run over the webinar agenda for today. So we've got some introductions going on. We'll then run into what is AMP, some AMP use cases, and then we've got some discussion points. So we've got so today we've got two speakers. So Ajit Bola, Senior Account Manager at MAP, and Matthew Vernout, Director of Privacy at 250OK. That will be doing some discussion points at the end of the webinar. So looking forward to get you guys going. So Matthew, if you want to take over.
Great, thanks very much for the introductions and thanks for having me. Just some high-level background on AMP is where we're going to start. Hopefully you're here because you're interested in learning more as opposed to learning what AMP is. But for the most part, AMP was created in 2015, sort of the original announcement around the project, just looking to help build faster mobile-enabled web pages with lighter content that would render quicker on mobile devices. And it's really then moved and evolved from there into the actual web itself to make the web faster. In early 2019, so we're still talking very current here, it was announced that AMP for email would be launching. And again, with the same idea of making emails more interactive, making transactions for consumers easier. And the initial groups that have come out and said they will support AMP in the inbox started with Gmail, who's been leading the project, Mail.ru, and Outlook.com. So, covering a pretty good range of internet providers, mailbox providers, who's going to be supporting AMP for email. Right now, most of the conversation we've seen has focused really heavily on Gmail, and the examples you'll see today later on as we talk through are going to be Gmail based, but certainly you will hopefully get a good feel for some of the things that AMP enables you to do. So really focusing on the consumer experience in the inbox and the consumer experience engaging with your brands.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. So what I want to do now is run through some of the key kind of use cases and examples that we've seen so far, and I guess how those kind of concepts can be applied across a number of different kind of scenarios. So in the first example that I want to show you is from Doodle. Now, what this functionality offers is an interactive live kind of calendar that can be viewed at any time and which will change dynamically depending on that person's availability. Now, I know personally from my experience, it can be a nightmare at times to, when you receive an email, you answer back to a later availability, and that's already kind of gone. So this is great to see that, something has kind of come into play to kind of help resolve that. But I think expanding on this, what else can we do with this kind of live content? Well, if you think about stuff like inventory, if you have, for example, number of kind of flight tickets that are on sale or train tickets, from that one email now you can see what availability is left and what kind of times. But as well, what if there's been delays with your flight, let's say? Now you'll see that dynamically kind of changing within that same email. As well, I think, if we look at stuff around kind of retail, such as restaurants, you make a booking at a pizza restaurant, but suddenly that slot's now gone. You'll now have an email that you can go back to at any time that will tell you automatically which availability slots have come up and gone on the fly. So it's again making, I think, life convenient for the end user by bringing this technology into play. Great. Now, this next example from Google themselves. Now, this is a live example actually that you can go and try, available in G Suite at the minute. I think what it really kind of hones in on is how you could apply it to a service scenario. So For example, a customer makes a booking, and they have some questions or queries, and they want to interface with that company. Through AMP now, you'll have one single kind of place where this is possible. We're able to track those conversations and refer back to them and talk to that customer through one exact kind of channel. So again, I think making life much easier for people, just generally speaking, without having to interface through different kind of platforms and mediums to get an answer or a question back. And now this final example from Oyo. So this is quite a heavy kind of retail example where I think it has a very website style experience. What it allows you to do is see detail, but actually go further into that detail as well. So you'd like to think that with the recipient being able to kind of have so much more information at the disposal within that email, it would influence, I guess, fewer misclicks onto the website, thus kind of, I guess, improving your click to conversion rate as a result. As well, we see kind of image carousels now available on desktop. Image carousels by no means are new in email, but I think they've always had an element of kind of restriction around kind of HTML5. So, native kind of iOS apps, etc. Now we're seeing this kind of interactive technology rolling out across the board through AMP. So, I'd expect to see, much more better engaging email as a result. Okay, so discussion points for AMP. So what is the future of AMP? So I guess it's me and you, this one, Matt. So I think from my kind of point of view, it's hard to really know the future until I think more and more people start to adopt it. It's in very early stages at the minute where, it was released around March time, and ESPs have been catching up to build in the kind of MIME type and relevant functionality. I think one of the key drivers here will be the rate of adoption. If more and more people do adopt it, and we start to see, larger kind of organizations putting it in as part of their normal kind of marketing activities, then we'll start to see a proper role for AMP, I think, going forward within these types of email communications. And I think that will be a key kind of driver around its kind of longevity. I mean, what have you kind of seen on your side, Matt, if you've got any kind of insight into this?
Yeah, I think we're at that point where we're sort of, the chicken and the egg. So we have some people supporting it. We have a large number of people not supporting it. We have some pretty interesting use cases that have been sort of demonstrated but are not yet shown in the wild. And there's a significant number of people, I think, that are still sort of in the let's wait and see what happens category. So they're waiting on either their providers to build the support for the current MIME type so that they can play with it and demo it out, or even launch it. It's still a bit of a gated access, at least within the Google platforms. So you need to comply with their security policies and basically apply and supply your domains. So there's still a lot of friction as we continue to see this move forward. Hopefully that friction will reduce, and consumer brands and other entities beyond just those that are part of sort of the launch process will start to use this, and we'll see some more examples in the wild.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the key thing is inspiring kind of thought leadership and seeing more examples to inspire your own creativity from. So yeah, I agree. Hopefully, as we start to see more of these kind of coming into play, we should start to see some really cool kind of use of AMP that may not be so obvious right now.
And certainly there's a learning curve for coding these, because it's significantly different than coding your standard sort of HTML or commercial message that has been relatively the same for the last 2 decades. So just building up the credentials as an email developer for this type of solution, which maybe has been more of a web-based developers type experience in the past. So we're seeing a merging of those two groups again.
Yeah, so exciting times, I think, in the email world in terms of skill sets and what we can achieve here then.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I guess next kind of topic around kind of security concerns. So I guess from my kind of take on this, now with AMP, there's an element of, I guess, a third party, Google in this case, that could in theory be caching some of your activity or your actions before you actually get to the destination website. And I guess that kind of element of how private are your interactions within your mailbox, where previously you would regard that as quite a safe space. I mean, from your side, Matt, having worked in privacy quite a while, do you think this kind of presents quite an element of risk or something that needs to be quite clearly defined?
Yeah, I certainly think what we've seen with the security requirements to become part of the AMP project within Gmail. There are requirements where you have to sort of get pre-approved, if you will, by them, and you have to follow best practices around authentication and DMARC and those types of things. However, we've spent a lot of time in the industry from a security point of view trying to remove things like scripting from the inbox, because in the past, that's how malware was distributed. And there was a period of time when mailbox providers would look at certain keywords in messaging, and if one of them, for example, was like execute, you could be saying, like, we're going to execute the project. They would try to break it because they would think it would be code trying to execute some kind of remote script. So it's very interesting that we've gone sort of from allowing scripting to not allowing scripting, and now we're sort of back into the AMP scripting requirements or ability to use that type of scripting. You're all using potentially third-party scripting calls. You're caching more information. There's more information for someone who could be monitoring an inbox from a programmatic point of view to use and analyze. So there are sort of lots of different potential security concerns or privacy concerns. But I think we're at that point still where we're early enough in adoption. They haven't been made sort of public, but I think it's something to continue to monitor and continue to sort of understand where those risks are and how to make sure that you're continuing to play on the right side of the line, if you will, and not cross those boundaries into things that are maybe going to be detrimental or harmful to consumers, even things like taking into account privacy legislation. You're now watching people do way more interactive stuff in their inbox. And how is that going to be viewed when this becomes extremely popular under things like GDPR and tracking and consumer behavior modeling and things like that. So, we're at the very early stages, and it'll be interesting to continue to watch it. But I think there's always the potential where, as an industry, we run for things and try to get sort of be the first and be the most flashy and do those types of things without always thinking, is this the right thing to do? Is there a security concern or a privacy concern that I need to be thinking about here?
Agreed.
And even, is this something that my brand should be doing?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, as you said, it's so kind of early, the stages at the minute. We can only kind of hypothetically, I think, think about all these kind of concerns until we start seeing, more of these emails in production. And then really kind of seeing, okay, which are legitimate, which aren't, and building legislation around that. So that's great.
Right. And I think, sorry, one other thing there around sort of the security concerns comes back to things like, a lot of people install things like ad blockers, and how are those going to be impacted? How are those going to potentially break AMP emails? Will they actually be able to be impacted there? So the security or privacy conscious consumer, how are they being impacted by this as well? So there is sort of that other side to think about.
Yeah, and I think, speaking from Europe anyway, I think with GDPR and how it came along, people are way more kind of privacy savvy, so definitely more aware of how their data is being utilized in this scenario. Great. So the next topic, so how will AMP affect tracking and analytics? So, this brings up a good question, I think, where traditional kind of HTML email has had kind of static links that can be tracked by your ESB or by yourself. Now we've got AMP, where it's got this host of dynamic content with different kind of buttons, etc., that can all kind of be populated in that email. And I'm speaking from a map perspective here. I think what we know is that we can track AMP email, opens and renders and delivery, same as any normal email. But I think for us as well, even there's an element of clients need to use more GA to be able to kind of see exactly which kind of requests have been made. Will it be a case that you'll have to track it via external services to see which user-initiated requests may have come through? It's still a bit of an unknown. I mean, I think personally we're going to do it for a phased approach. So get the basics right first, see what needs to be kind of done in terms of tracking, how we can adapt our platform around it, and then probably look to tackle it that way. I mean, would you kind of echo the same kind of opinion there, Matt, with it being so kind of different to how we've normally tracked email?
Yeah, I think sort of the basics will still be there, but you're right. With the dynamic nature of the content being served, we're going to lose the clear path of, user opens message, user clicks on link, user goes to web page. Now it will be user opens message, clicks around in the email a whole bunch, and how do you track that and follow it from an analytics point of view of, where are they in your funnel? And then maybe even they can check out from the email and go right to your shopping cart, or right to the download, or right to whatever your call to action is. And you're going to lose potentially that middle piece of what did they do while they were on my website.
Yeah, it kind of completely changes just the whole kind of ethos and the methodologies of just how we've tracked normal traditional email for so long. And yeah, like I said, it's kind of all over the place in terms of working out how do you now tangibly kind of see, conversions, etc., from an AMP email. So
right, and the other thing, as a deliverability person, historically throwing privacy on top and then moving forward into sort of analytics, but we've always said send to your most engaged, most active users. If you are losing or changing the way that you're monitoring or determining who are your most active, most engaged users, that's going to change that entire process for us to think about and understand where does the engagement monitoring change and the metrics change to determine who do we retarget, who do we send the next piece of content to, where does this fall in the next drip campaign that we're planning. Those types of things will all have to change. So it's not just a matter, hey, I coded a new email. Now it's a matter of I coded a new email and I need to learn what to do with it post delivery.
It's true. It just really redefines that whole kind of measurement of engagement. So I think there'll be some work done on this definitely. So, to kind of rewrite this and give everyone a playbook to kind of go by. So yeah, really interested to see what comes off the back of this.
Right. So it's kind of like we've come to the point where I think if anybody who's attending has some questions, please ask. But aside from, I do already have a few questions. So keep the questions coming. So I have a question from Amy, and actually is a very good question because I'm a B2B marketer myself, but I find this very interesting because I don't really know a lot about AMP. So Amy's asking, do you need a developer to use AMP emails, or can you do it through drag and drop? Just like, in HubSpot or whatever, any kind of platform you have, like you can just drag and drop emails. But how will this be in the future with AMP, or can you do it? Do you actually need this person to code it for you?
So talking from a map perspective, so we'll be looking to release at least AMP functionality into our platform within Q4 2019. The way that's going to start initially will be supporting the MIME type itself. So yes, in answer to your question, it will require dev resource initially to code those emails on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, naturally, where we want to get to next year is a point where drag and drop functionality is available to marketers so that they're able to kind of take advantage of this and utilize AMP as much as possible, as with any other email.
Great. Okay, so I've got a question from Georgia. Georgia is asking if 250 OK, if they support AMP, and how does that work?
Yeah, so 250, we're not so much an ESP in regards to sending mail, like someone like MAP would be. Our solution would be more determining how the messages behave in the inbox. So one of our tools, and it's actually integrated with the MAP application, is around inbox rendering. So how does the message render? So when you're getting ready to send your AMP messages, our solution would then be able to take that message in Gmail and render it and show you what it would look like once it's delivered to a consumer, for example. So you'd be able to see the functionality and see the display of the message within the application, within the client view as a pre-deployment test. So that's really where our solution fits in. It also allows you to do some campaign management and sort of A/B testing style of review for those messages. So if you had a non-AMP campaign you were sending compared to an AMP campaign that you wanted to test how the performance was, that type of thing would fit nicely into the rendering solutions and tools that 250 OK offers.
Great. I think this is a question I think both Ajit and yourself, Matthew, Mike, might be able to answer. So I've got a question from Mike, and this is very much specific to spam. So related to the definition of engagement changing with AMP, how do you expect spam filters to evolve with AMP? What kind of additional things will ISPs need to look for, if anything, with an email using AMP? So this is quite interesting.
Or do you want to go first, Matt, or shall I?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, cheers.
Feel free. I'll take second crack
Cheers.
at it.
No worries. So I think the very obvious thing there is around, the key thing from Gmail is having to be a registered dynamic mail sender, and having to register your domain with them to even send AMP email. As well as that, you've got kind of prerequisites such as having a DMARC header, SPF, and DKIM. So you naturally think that having all of these kind of checks in place, they'll have a pretty good understanding of the type of sender you are that's trying to send these emails. So I think with spam and inbox placement, they'd have a pretty good understanding of if it is legitimate or not. Matt, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I would echo that. Google has put in place some of those security type requirements in order to participate. Will it change spam filtering? I don't think it will change it drastically. We're still looking at reputation as the key driver. So if consumers are complaining about the mail you're sending, consumers aren't engaging with the mail you're sending, those things will still be very heavy drivers in regards to being able to participate. So you're going to see a mix of, you have to have the technical side down to validate who the sender is. But from a reputational point of view, domain reputation, IP reputation, they're still going to play a part, as well as consumer feedback. So all of these different things are still going to come into play. Where we may see some changes would be around things like the scripting required to send AMP emails. That might become, as a registered sender, you'll maybe have a little more leniency in regards to some of the scripting languages that you can use. However, for the average sender, without enabling sort of that type of pre-approved process, AMP simply won't work for you. So they're basically trying to build the trust model into the program as they go.
Great. I'm getting a lot of technical questions, by the way. So I think a few of them I might skip, and we will probably just need to get back to them personally. But I think there's just a few questions I'll just run through and see if you guys know the answer. So you said, Ajit, that you need to be registered with Gmail, have all these things in place. How do you get registered with Gmail on those topics?
Yeah, so you can actually go to the Gmail AMP page. It's freely available online, and there's actually a link to start the process of registering as a dynamic mail sender. happy to put a link up maybe after this webinar, just so that everyone can clearly see that. And within there as well, it will give you some of the prerequisites, etc., that you'll have to kind of go through to kind of get AMP ready. So that's no problem. We can put that in after.
Okay, cool. So I'll go and see if I can do 2 more questions. And this question is actually quite interesting. It's AMP works on Gmail desktop only. What is the point / benefit of sending AMP emails if they only work on Gmail desktop? I don't know. Matthew, do you have an idea of this?
Sure, yeah. Well, Gmail typically for consumer brands is the largest destination for email that they're sending, either through direct to gmail.com, googlemail.com, or even to the G Suite hosted domains. So that can range anywhere from about 45 to 60% of the average consumer file. So if you're looking for a way to engage with a predominantly large group of users that you normally would send mail to, that's a pretty good indication of maybe a trial group to look at. We study sort of trends and where inboxes are going and who's hosting what, and Gmail year over year for the last 5 years has been growing in sort of the destination of where mail is going.
Great. So how do I actually, so for example, I'm getting an email which is AMP, which is an AMP created. But if I get it on my email or open it on my phone versus my desktop, how will it look different? Like that would be quite an interesting one. Like if I get something very specialized on my desktop, but not so much on my phone, what's that going to look like?
So I think, you'll still send your normal kind of HTML kind of creative as well as the AMP email. So you'll always have a necessary kind of fallback in place, because exactly it's always going to be a case that, there won't be support for that specific kind of MIME type on every device, etc. So having, a necessary kind of fallback in place will help to kind of counter that.
Great. All right. So I think I'm just running through all of the questions that we had. I might just get one more, and I think it's actually we've just gone over some examples, and I've got one more question, sort of on the examples sort of AMP in the wild. We are seeing a lot of big companies using Pinterest, like Pinterest, for example, using these examples. But have we seen any smaller companies or any other companies sort of using AMP already?
I mean, at present, no, and I think part of that was around a lot of the kind of examples that are on the market at the minute were part of those kind of early beta testers and beta kind of customers who really kind of trialed the functionality and saw it end to end. A big kind of I think thing that's holding it back has been literally the fact that most service providers didn't support AMP before AMP came out. So suddenly there's a lot of engineering effort behind that to kind of get it readily available for the entire market. I mean, I know that companies such as ourselves have been stabbing at this for quite a few months now. So I wouldn't see it being too far in the future where we start to see examples from your SMEs to your enterprises, etc., to get a more rounded opinion on that.
Great.
Yeah,
so
I'd agree.
yeah,
Sorry, yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the availability of it and the effort to create an AMP email versus a static HTML email, you're going to see the large companies doing it first. And then as it becomes easier to build, as more drag and drop development becomes potentially available, that's when you'll start to see it reach into sort of the medium and small size businesses outside of those that are extremely eager to push forward with it and make it a priority for their brands.
Great. So there's a few people, Michael, Carsten, etc. We will get back to you personally, but we're just running out of time. Well, thank you, Matthew, thank you, Ajit, for doing this webinar. Thanks everybody for asking questions, and we hope you enjoyed it. We'll get the recording over to everybody. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.